Get the hand signal, the thumbs up, and we are ready to go. Hello and welcome to today's Tuesday live session. Once again, we are live from Graph UK HQ, and we've got our resident expert on all things Rainwater Harvesting, David, back in the hot seat.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. It's good to be back talking rainwater.
Yes, so this again is rainwater research, our second ever.
Yeah.
And I have to say, David, I'm very excited to talk about rainwater harvesting. We got lost in the emotions last week when we were going all things about how rainwater can be very beneficial to the UK in a potential water crisis. And not only that, I'm in a great mood today because my team won 5-0 last night. We smashed Everton to pieces, and I'm absolutely loving it because there's someone out there that knows why it's so good to beat Everton 5-0. Enjoy the relegation battle, lads. You're going to enjoy it. But anyway, we'll get into today's presentation on all things rainwater. So to start things off, we're going to be discussing what are the main differences between an indirect feed and a direct feed rainwater harvesting system and the differences between the two systems. So David, kick us off. What are the main differences between those two?
Okay. So with rainwater harvesting in general, I think it's important to remember, as we discussed last week, that the system will primarily work on rainwater and you'd always have some form of mains water backup supply. Now, this works very differently when we talk about direct and indirect systems. With a direct feed system, we very much have a direct source of water going to the appliances. Now, this is beneficial for mainly two reasons. Firstly, we can pump the water long distances, and we can also achieve a very good flow rate. With the indirect system, we generally have a pumped source up to a header tank, a loft tank, and then from there, it's then gravity feeding to the appliances where a demand is created. Now, the good thing about a header tank system is it can help us save on energy because we reducing the run time on the pump if we have some sort of delayed action valve on the balance tank. And we also are ensuring we've always got some form of water source in place if we were to have a power cuts. Now, with a direct feed system, just jumping back, as we have this direct feed, we get electricity directly to the pump. If you were to have an extended power cut, you wouldn't get either mains or rainwater supply to those toilet systems or garden irrigation extraction points until the power is restored. So that's just something to bear in mind. But in terms of the main systems, those are pretty much the things we would discuss between the two.
Sorry.
Go on. I was going to build on that more.
Go for it.
With Graph here, we generally specialize in 3 direct system packages. This is usually a submersible pump garden system. And then we have 2 wall-mounted pump stations or kiosks in the form of the EcoPlus and the Silencio system. There is also a add-on to the garden comfort system where we introduce a mains water top-up facility. This is quite useful if you were to ever run out of rainwater in the underground tank. We've got a mains water backup supply to the underground tank to ensure we've always got that constant source of water to be used. And then, of course, there is a header tank system that we do here, again, utilising a submersible pump, pumping water up to the loft of the property, and then from there, we gravity feed into the appliances when required. So there's quite a lot of system options in place. Depending on what the customer wants to do, in terms of the extraction points, you can optimise the performance. You can have direct feed system to outside taps, as well as connections going up to the loft of the property if you've got an indirect system. So there is a little bit to think about in terms of optimizing the solution. Of course, if there are questions, we can help people with those on a one-to-one basis and hopefully get the most ideal solution for them.
So basically, just to recap, the main differences between the two is that an indirect feed, you'll have a header tank in a loft or a higher space in the property. And with your direct systems, it'll be directly fed to the appliance that's going to be used. And just to elaborate on that, with the header tank and indirect feed, you will always have a submersible pump inside the tank, whereas our kind of domestic use of direct feed systems have a wall-mounted pump externally to the tank.
Yes, that's very much the case. As I say, there is that other option, which is an add-on to the garden system, where we'd still use a submersible pump, but then we have the addition of the mains water backup supply if we were going to, really want to keep the system functioning at all times.
So what would you say are the main the main benefits of an indirect system versus the main benefits of a direct feed system?
Firstly, the indirect system, we've got the ability of the energy consumption, and and this power connection. Basically, with a header tank system itself, we've got water being pumped up to the balance tank. The system will primarily work on rainwater until we run out of water in the underground tank, in which the pump will stop running because we've got no water to send. The water level in the header tank will drop down, and then we'll have a second mains water backup supply to that header tank. And that header tank system will then continue to work on the pressure of main supply until we have our new rainfall period, in which the submersible pump will then start sending water back into the tank and will return to working on rainwater. The system, again, is fully automatic. And we're always ensuring that we've got some water being fed to those appliances, whether it be, of course, if we do have the event of power cuts, or of course, if we have extended periods without rainfall, we've always got that mains water top-up supply. Again, if we were to refer to mains water top-up supplies with direct feed systems, we generally detect the level of water in the underground tank with a float switch or a float sensor, depending on the site of the system. And then, of course, if we were to detect we're running out of rainwater in the ground tank, we've got that mains water backup facility to ensure the system keeps operating. So the customer gets the water where they need to go in their property.
Perfect. So when it comes down to the choice, it's just personal preference as to whether they want a direct feed system or whether they have the ability to have an indirect system in the loft of the property.
Very much so, yeah. Normally, we would talk about direct feed systems if it was an existing property. One thing to think about, certainly if you're doing an indirect header tank system, is that you've got to get both a rainwater and a mains water feed up to the attic of the property. So if there's this property already in place, that might be slightly trickier than it would be if it was a new build. So again, things to think about if you're going down, if you want to dive into it a bit deeper, is in terms of not only the supply and the advantages each option gives you, but of course, how feasible is the installation of the system onto your existing property or new build property.
Okay, so when it comes to obviously think about the installation side, because you're having to run a separate pipe for both mains water and rainwater, it's going to be easier when you're first initially building the house to run it up whilst it's obviously in the build process.
Yes.
But if you're retrofitting a system onto an existing property, it's going to be a lot harder to do so.
Yeah, much more tricky, but still achievable, but need to have a plan of action.
Perfect. So I think that covers all the main differences between the two types of systems and how they operate and the main benefits of each and what you might want to consider when choosing which type of system you want to install for your property, whether, like we mentioned before, it's going to be a new build or whether you're looking to retrofit it into an existing property. So now we're going to move on to the project highlight of this week's live session. So we're going to take this away by talking about Oak View Primary School and where they installed a firefighting tank. So this is something we've seen a lot more regular kind of designed on drawings, the use of firefighting tanks in and around the UK. So we're going to talk about this project in particular and why we're seeing more of these types of systems at the moment. So I think on your screen now, you should be able to see some pictures of the installation of the tank. So David, take it away.
Yes, Oak View Primary School was one of the first firefighting tanks that we did here in the UK. It was some time ago now, but we got some useful imagery from it and of the tank installation itself. And of course, there are a lot of lessons learned that we've been able to implement into the more projects that we're doing now. So with a firefighting tank, you generally need to have a certain volume of water available during the emergency event. These typically start from around about 45,000 litres. As Callum mentioned, we installed a 52,000 litre tank at this site, so we're obviously within that restriction, just encompassing that by a few thousand litres. And you can see from the images, there's the ability to have multiple connection points at the top of the tank. Now, we could just have potentially one fire access point for the emergency team to connect onto, or you could have multiple ones. And with the Caritex XL system, which you can see in the photo here, we have the option, of course, to extend the tank volume further. So you can link tanks together to increase tank volume. So depending on what the size of the developments, you may need to increase the volume of water available if the emergency event did happen. Along with, of course, the tank itself, we have the accessibility down into the tank for maintenance and servicing. And we also have the signage and couplings available, which basically indicates that there is an emergency water supply available and local for the fire service to connect onto. Of course, it's going to be designed into the emergency service manual, the risk assessment, so the fire services know where it is. But it's also, of course, quite visually present in the images you can see now, and all systems here from us will come with the ability to have the UK connection point for the fire services, as well as the signage in terms of not only the sign saying EWS for emergency water supply, but also the covers as well. So really is a complete solution sold by Graph. And as I say, Oakview Primary School was one of the first ones we did. I think we did it a few years ago now, but we've done many more since then. It was a great learning curve and great project for us.
So with the firefighting tanks, are we seeing that when it comes to the emergency water supply, is it being used with rainwater or is it mains water? Because I know with firefighting tanks, in case of emergency, you need to make sure that that tank is full at any time period, really, because an emergency could happen at pretty much any time. So are we seeing it filled with rainwater or filled with mains water instead?
It's quite right as you said, Callum. We always need to ensure we have the tank volume available to us. Most inquiries start when we talk about firefighting tanks with somebody asking that exact question: can I use rainwater to my fire solution? Now you can, but you need to ensure that you've got that tank volume available should the emergency event happen. And if you were to have consecutive emergency events, you need to ensure that the tank is topped up in that time frame. And if you're waiting on a rainfall to happen, that may never have happened. So it's up to the emergency fire services to refill that tank. Now, what you could do is you could have a rainwater harvesting system separate from the firefighting tank alongside the system, and then you could just pump that water across if the emergency event did happen. So we can use rainwater. You could have an automatic top-up supply from a rainwater tank via a float valve if you wanted to, but we always need to ensure that that set volume dictated in the emergency event is always there and available. So rainwater can be used, but we wouldn't rely on a rain event to top the tank up with
so it's very much making sure the tank is full at any time, because you never know when an emergency can happen.
Exactly.
Perfect. And we're seeing quite a lot of these coming through now with firefighting tank solutions. We're seeing a lot more on drawings in the initial design process.
Very much so, yeah.
So something very exciting coming along here.
Watch this page.
Watch this space, yeah. Hopefully some more tanks going in for us to reveal on the project highlights of Rainwater Research, as we all know you love and enjoy watching on a Tuesday morning. So now we've discussed the main topic about the differences between a direct and an indirect feed system, and we've talked about the project highlights. Now it's time to answer your questions that have come in during today's live session. So I think we have some questions coming in. They'll be on the screen in a second. Our fabulous, wonderful assistant behind the screen is getting them up as we speak. So the first question coming in is, how does the float switch work in the tank?
Okay. So with a float switch, you would normally see this working alongside a direct feed system. Now, with a direct feed system, this is very much pumping the water to the appliances when a demand is created. And the float switch is designed to ensure you've always got some form of water being supplied to those appliances. So in most cases, you'll have a float switch in the tank, which will be in the vertical position. When it's in the vertical position, it's saying, yes, we have rainwater. We can supply rainwater on demand to the applications. If, however, we start running low on rainwater in an underground tank, the float switch will drop. And as with any switch, once the switch drops, it says, alert, we need to do something about this. And in this case, of course, we're saying we need to supply mains water in some form as a mains water backup. Now, depending on the type of system you may have, whether it be one of our wall-mounted pump kiosks, or if it's a submersible pump solution with a mains water top-up unit, the float switch will do that control automatically, and you're basically ensuring you've always got either rain or mains water going through the system to the appliances when required. So the float switch is there for the automatic control of rain and mains water to always ensure that the customer has some form of water going to their appliances.
Perfect. I think that answers that question very well. And we've got another one that come in, I believe. Can I install a rainwater harvesting system underneath a driveway?
Okay. With certainly graph tanks, as well as many of the systems I'm sure you can find on the market, they are designed to support certainly light duty traffic loads. You may need to have a look at the cover levels over the tank to ensure you've got enough cover to distribute the load. And you also need to upgrade the tank cover. So with our systems, we'd normally supply a green pedestrian lid, which is quite flat, so it's discreet. We would upgrade that to a cast iron lid, which is suitable for light duty traffic, and that's cast iron. With larger duty loads, whether we're looking at potentially HGV or anything higher than that, we would look at potentially recessing one of our own lids and putting a suitable manhole cover, hole cover and frame over the top. So whether that be T400 or higher, it is achievable, but we need to start thinking about specialist installation practices to do it. So certainly on domestic side, when we can do light duty traffic relatively straightforward. When we talk about construction and certainly bigger sites, we look to upgrade the system with a bespoke manhole cover and frame.
Perfect. Right, and then we have one. Ooh. Is a firefighter water tank mentioned in any of the UK regulations or mandatory in any specific schemes?
Okay, interesting question. With firefighting tanks, it's very much dependent on the size of the project. We may not be aware of them, but most, whether it be a school, a supermarket, a hotel complex, will always have a fire hydrant access point, and it will of course be located as part of the risk assessment of the site. Now, with the graph system, we're basically supplying our own units to support that application. Ours is slightly more colourful, but in relation to the actual question, it is very much mandatory to have one. I mean, fire services, of course, aren't going to have an endless supply of water on the backs of their trucks. Depending on the size and potential scale of what could happen at that site, you should have that water present. If it's going to be a smaller domestic, maybe it's a group of homes, for example, there will still be an access point for a top-up facility for a fire engine. They would go over, top their own tank up within their fire engine, and of course then go back to the emergency event. So there's always something present. These are, of course, as I say, located and marked in terms of where, and the fire service knows where they are, but it's very important to have one as part of a project to ensure that this box is ticked. It's very much something that should be looked out for when you're designing your project.
Perfect. So just to recap, it's very much mandatory, but it just depends on the type of project that we're seeing. If it's somewhere that can connect to the hydrant connect to the mains water supply, it most likely will. But if it hasn't got the option to connect to that mains water supply, that's when it might need a tank in itself, an underground tank like our Carrot XXL firefighting tanks to hold that mains water in preparation for that emergency water event.
Exactly.
But as you said, yes, they are mandatory with the regulations on all sites. Great question. Actually, it was a very good question. Right, next one that's come in. What happens during periods of no rainfall and the tank runs out of rainwater?
Okay, now with sizing of rainwater harvesting systems, it's very much looked at in terms of the location of where the rainwater harvesting tank is and the daily storage event you want to allow for. So in most situations, if the system is sized correctly, you shouldn't run out of rainwater in the underground tank. In such events that we do run out of that, we do have the option of a mains water top-up supply. This comes in many forms, whether it be a mains water supply directly to the underground tank under gravity. You could look at having, if you're looking at a loft header tank installation, you would have a mains water supply directly to the loft tank. So that would then, of course, top up under pressure should the rainwater reduce to the bottom of the tank as empty. And then with a more mounted pump kiosk with the float switch or float dispenser, that will detect the level of water in the ground tank once again. And of course, we then have a valve opening to redirect the water directly off the mains until we have an rainfall event to refill the underground tank. So with rainwater harvesting systems, it's very much an automated process. Whether it be a header tank system or a direct feed system, we've very much got a method to ensure we've always got some form of water going to the appliances. Does that answer the question? Yeah. So pretty much in in the event of no rainfall, we've got a mains water backup solution hopefully in place to ensure we've got continued water being supplied to the appliances.
And that's both on an indirect feed system with a header tank or a direct feed system, bar the garden comfort,
Yes,
which can
exactly.
be retrofitted in order to
ensure, yes, exactly.
Yes. Perfect. And the next one, where would the overflow from a rainwater harvesting tank go to?
Okay, now this very much depends on the solution you're discharging to. You would normally go to a soakaway, or you also have the option of a storm drain if there is one local which you can discharge to. You'd normally favour the storm drain if you haven't got any sort of percolation rate from the soil. So with a soakaway option, we would look at testing the permeability, the infiltration rate of the soil, and if there is the space available and there is a very good quality soil, we would look to discharge to ground. It might be that if the ground conditions are very, very poor, we might need to look to discharge that to a storm drain. There may be other options available on the site, but those would be the primary two we would look at. Certainly when we talk about graft systems, we actually offer certain filters depending on the type of solution you're going to be discharging to. If we're going to a soakaway, we'd normally look at some sort of basket filter, so all the leaves and debris are retained within the filter. If we're going to a storm drain or potentially another option, we would look at one of our self-cleaning filters where the water is washed over the top of the filter and all the leaves and debris would basically escape down the pipeline after the tank, which we wouldn't want in our soakaway.
Perfect. And I think that's answered that. And I think that's all the questions for today. So thank you very much for tuning in to this week's Rainwater Research. We hope you have enjoyed it. Next Tuesday live session will be the return of Wastewater Wisdom, and we'll again be joined by David to talk all things wastewater treatment. So yeah, once again, thank you for tuning in and thank you for your questions. We found them really good to answer. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. Take care, and we'll see you next time.